You know, after 7 years, you would think that the President of the United States, Barack Obama, would figure out how to negotiate a deal. This is Dan Perkins.
You know, after 7 years, you'd think the Obama administration would learn the law, but apparently they haven't, and a judge last week rebuked them. I'm Don Mazzella, and what concerns you concerns us.
It's time for Two Guys from Verona. Each week, you will hear from Dan Perkins, a financial expert, a regular columnist for the Hill website, and best-selling author, and Don Mazzella, a veteran journalist, author, and radio host talking about things that concern you politically, financially, and socially. They will also try to give listeners a heads up on future happenings.
Well, Don, you know, the president's in his continuation of his apology farewell tour, and now he's in Vietnam. He's getting on his way to go to Japan to visit Hiroshima. And I listened to some of his speech today about what he talks about, the things that there's too much money in politics, and that there's race in our criminal justice system in the United States, and why in the world he's talking about all the things that he sees are wrong with the United States in front of the Vietnamese people. I don't have any idea. But I do know that there are a lot of people, myself included, and you, who are concerned that the president has decided to not only open diplomatic relations, but begin to sell weapons and armaments to the Vietnamese government, and didn't ask for any accounting for the men and women who are missing in action and have been missing since the end of the war. It sends to me a very, very, very bad message about this man's commitment to the American military. In a place where 55,000 Americans were killed and countless were wounded and are continuing to deal with that wounding today, the president did nothing to try and help discover where their fallen comrades are. He ignored it. It wasn't on the agenda. There was no discussion about it. To me, it really bothered me that what kind of a president do we have who has no compassion and no concern about anybody else but himself. This tour was about him. It was about him being able to criticize the United States in front of another foreign power, to say to the Chinese, well, we're going to stand with our allies if you want to continue your expansion, and we're not going to fight with them. We'll just stand by them, and we'll let you do, and then we have a right. All the world has a right to free open lanes for shipping and aircraft, and they're not military zones that you can create. And if you do, we'll have to take legal action. So again, the president wimped out, did nothing to confront China and their nation-building tactic that's going on in the South China Sea. He just basically kind of ignored it and said, you know, you can do what you want, and we may have to sue you, but he doesn't really care. You know, and it's interesting when you think about it. When this happened, when he announced last week that they were going to sell weapons to Vietnam, the first question that came in my mind, Don, where was John McCain? Where was Lindsey Graham? Where were these men who also fought in the Vietnam War and probably have comrades who died and are unaccounted for? Why have we not heard anything from either one of them about what the president's done? You know, and I heard something today on Rush, you and I talked about it in the pre-show, that whether you're Republican or Democrat, there seems to be a reluctance to criticize the president on anything that the president does for fear of being called a racist. You can't criticize a black man without being considered being called a racist. And there are people that still believe that today, that the reason why nobody has criticized in the political parties, the leadership of the political parties, has criticized the president is because they don't want the backlash of being accused as being a racist. So that Barack Obama, in essence, is a protected entity and probably will be protected entity for the rest of his life. No matter how bad his administration turns out to be, and it's been pretty bad, nobody will criticize him because he is the first black president. But I think that this was the straw that broke the camel's back for me, that we have a president who had an opportunity to go to a communist nation and ask for a full accounting for the lost men and women who fought in that country. Don?
Well, I agree with you. You know, that war is very close to me in a lot of different ways. My next door neighbor, who I grew up with, died literally in my arms in the middle of a battlefield there. But to the credit, quietly over the years, and when you mentioned this is what you wanted to talk about, I called a friend of mine in the war graves division responsible for recovering American remains. And don't forget, we're recovering remains from World War II. Mm-hmm. We did, just recently. They've been going over Viet Nam with a fine-tooth comb trying to find things. And there is a quiet team of Vietnamese and Americans that are combing the jungles and the byways of Viet Nam. And perhaps Obama should have said something while he was there. I wish he had said about the 55,000 Americans who died there protecting that country. But he didn't. And for that, he should be, as you say, chastised. And perhaps he's not being chastised because of he's black. I tend to think that that's part of it. The other part of it is the quiet way Trump is going about looking to bring blacks into the Republican Party. That's something we haven't talked about. Perhaps we should do it another time because we're running out of time. But why criticize him now? Doesn't gain Trump any benefit. Certainly Hillary at some point has got to have to run on his record if she's there as a nominee. And there's a lot of reasons why to keep him quiet. There was a story in one of the newspapers I saw, surprise, his popularity is growing. Well, that's only because he's doing everything sub rosa. But I'll go back to you and let you finish out.
Okay. I think that you said something that there was important. But there's been a shift. You know, when Hillary was first running, there was discussion, and she was the one who was saying it, is that there are parts of the Obama agenda that are not finished, that need to be finished. And so that the press was saying that Hillary is going to be the third term for Obama, continuation of the Obama philosophy.
They dropped that immediately when that went over like a lead balloon.
Yeah, well, you know what they're saying today? This is going to be the third term of the Clinton administration.
Well, it wasn't a bad administration compared to the Obama administration. So we should pray for a modicum of relief from everything, because we're going to have another segment on regulation, and we'll save that there.
Yeah.
But
so Bill was quoted today on Newsmax as saying that he's not really interested in working in the White House. In fact, he wants to stay away as far as he can from the White House, and quote, and he said this, and the interns.
Well, at least he can laugh at himself. The point is, he couldn't get the Energizer money into the White House as easy as he could at Westchester.
Yeah,
so that maybe that's the reason.
Yeah, no, it's true. I do think that it's interesting that there's discussion about how quickly Trump made up ground on Hillary to the point that the election is in the margin of error in the polling data. And if you look at it, it's about 45-45, which means the independents, who make out something around 10% of the election, of the electorate, is going to decide the vote, who's going to be president. But I still believe that they talk about Hillary's negatives and they talk about Trump's negatives. There are different kinds of negatives. Hillary's negatives are they think she's a liar and they can't trust her. Those are really negatives. Trump's negatives are they don't like his style, they don't like his bluster, they don't know the way he's aggressive. But they don't attack his credibility the way they're attacking, and the Democrats are attacking Hillary's credibility, her honesty, and her integrity. And so there is a difference between bad ratings, and I think they are dramatically different between Hillary and Trump. The negatives are really quite different, and I think that again, when you and I have talked about this many times before, we're looking at a situation where when the people go in the voting booth, will some number of them not pull the lever for a liar? And with that, we need to take a commercial break. We'll be right back. This is Dan Perkins and Don Mazzella from Two Guys from Verona.
You're listening to Two Guys from Verona with Dan Perkins and Don Mazzella.
You know, Don, it's been interesting to watch the court system in this country, especially when they're dealing with lawyers from the Obama administration. I think there have been a number of cases with Hillary's emails where the judge slapped the hands of some of the lawyers, and in some cases threatened them. But you've got another twist to that story. So tell us about it.
Well, last week a federal judge who was hearing the case about the immigration, President Obama's desire to give immediate status to 800,000 immigrants, give them legal standing here in the country on the way to a green card and citizenship. Well, 2.5 years ago, the states, 26 states, went to court to try to stop it because they felt the burden of taking care of these people would be on theirs. And a judge stayed an order. They stayed the case until it could be heard, but he also took the government lawyer's word that none of these immigrants would be processed. Well, it turned out when they were saying that in court, they were processing 100,000 of this 800,000, and they lied and gave the judge numbers that were hopelessly out of date and said they were current. Well, the judge, after much digging by conservative groups and others, came up and showed the judge that indeed the lawyers were lying. And in a scathing decision, if you read it, it really reads as if a movie script, because you can't believe someone from the judge would say these words. He ordered that every Justice Department lawyer who came before a district court in the 26 states affected had to have taken an ethics course, a law ethics course, before they could go before the judge. He also ordered that the Justice Department and the person of Loretta Lynch had to in effect, clean up their act. It's another demonstration of how the framers of the Constitution, who made equal parts of the judiciary, the Congress, and the president, sought to create a balance. It's amazing how these men, and they were all men, came up with a Constitution that has lasted this long. Admittedly, it's been bent and stretched, and it's been stretched out of all proportion by President Obama and his cohorts. That seems to be working. If we hadn't lost a Supreme Court justice, we might have seen even more changes. But be that as it may, the judiciary is doing its job of balancing the government and the Constitution. And for that, we should be thankful. You have a very interesting statistic that I wish you'd share with the audience now, because I found it fascinating.
Is that the one we talked about last night?
Yes.
In the 7.5 years that President Obama has been president, I actually have one more that I didn't give you last night. There have been over 20,600 new regulations as the rule of law that have been issued, which is 7 a day, 365 days a year, 7 a day. But what's very important is that in order to administer those, they've hired 35,000 bureaucrats to administer the new regulations that the administration has put out. And it's really a situation where I'm curious, going back to your case, did the lawyers have any rationale for what they were doing?
They weren't asked because the judge didn't want them to perjure themselves further. It's interesting. He's cut himself off from commenting beyond the case because people have been trying to get him. And by the way, he was a Bush II appointee. It's fascinating. You read a decision, and he in effect says lawyers must come before the bar, before court, and tell the truth. They cannot lie. These lawyers out and out lied, as indeed the Wall Street Journal and other publications point out. They have been lying consistently throughout the Obama administration. They have been convenient about it. People who draft the laws have conveniently lied to the American people. We have the example of the Obamacare law draftee who said, one of them said, we had to fool the American public. The other one said we out lied to them.
That was Rhodes.
Yeah. But by the way, on that point, the Congress rebuked Obama, and another judge did by saying you can't spend the money your way, but only Obama administration has been taking money set aside for one purpose, to pay the insurance companies for their losses under Obamacare.
Right.
And Congress has said you can't do that, and the judiciary has said you can't do that. You know, laws are just that, laws not to. Yes, we stretch them, but we don't break them. And in many cases, the Obama administration has been breaking the laws. And what I find really interesting that came across the wire today, in the Charleston shooting, the Justice Department has decided to go for the death penalty. They didn't go for the death penalty in other places, but they want to do it for this poor, I think, misguided and delusional individual who went to a church where, as the NRA will tell you, people go where there are no guns. They don't go where there are guns. And she killed people. Admittedly, a tragic accident, but not something that deserves the death penalty, because in his way, that man is just as delusional as some of the other people that have been given lesser penalties. The administration picks and chooses its fights, and in the end, as the American people are demonstrating in this presidential campaign, they're getting a little sick and tired of it. My wife was out in Minneapolis, and it was interesting. She noticed there were no Hillary Clinton bumper stickers, but there were a heck of a lot of Trump stickers in Minneapolis, which is not noted to be in a conservative city.
So even Paul Ryan said last week in the area of Wisconsin, which is a very liberal area, that he sees more, as you said, more Trump stickers than he does Hillary stickers, and that he talks to Republican, especially labor people, who are just livid with Hillary and what's going on in terms of all the jobs that have been lost and what they've done. I do want to go before, because we just got a few seconds before we have to go to our next break, but I do want to ask you, go back to your original part of your story. These lawyers didn't make up on their own mind individually that they were going to lie before the court. Somebody told them to.
Absolutely. Well, that's what the judge also said. I'm glad you brought it up. He said it seemed to him by the way the facts were presented, that this was something that permeated the Justice Department, and that these lawyers were taking orders from people above them. And then he pointedly said political appointees. I found that very interesting. People should read this judge's opinion, because it is one of the most scathing indictments of the way the Obama administration operates than anything else I've seen, and it's something they can't keep.
One of the things, maybe what we should do is post that on our website.
Well, let's go find the copy and do it. You're right.
Okay. Well, it's time for us to take another break. We go to our commercial sponsors. Remember, you can send us an email at Dan or Don at twoguysfromverona.com. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. You're listening to Two Guys from Verona. Once again, here's your hosts, Dan Perkins and Don Mazzella.
Well, Don, it's time to visit Hillary and Bill again, but a different one. I want to ask our audience a rhetorical question. You know, Bill and Hillary said they came out of the White House broke. And in the time that they've been out of the White House, they've amassed $200 million in net worth, and they created the Clinton Foundation. So I'd like our audience to think about this question. Would they give up control of the $200 million and resign from the Clinton Foundation if she becomes elected president, and Bill is going to take over the economy for Hillary? Will they give it up? It's a great question. You know, as I said, she said, whether it's true or not, she's got her own words out there. She came out of the White House broke. And they didn't build a business. They didn't build a factory. They didn't manufacture anything. Well, sort of. They manufactured words. But the reality is they've built an enormous fortune generated from speaking fees of ungodly amounts. But there's an interesting little twist here. A university in the Midwest was looking for a speaker for their graduation. And they were presented with two choices. They could have Colin Powell for $50,000, or they could have Chelsea Clinton for $75,000. And if they chose Chelsea, she said that she would give the $75,000 to the Clinton Foundation. Now, which one do you think they chose, Don?
I have no idea.
They chose Chelsea. And I think the rationale was an institution of higher education who's looking for money for government grants and financial support to keep their university alive, made a decision that they'd have more influence with Chelsea because she was giving her money to the foundation, but in reality, she was the daughter of the person who just might be the next president of the United States. So, would the graduates have learned more from Colin Powell in their commencement speech than they would have learned from Chelsea Clinton? Without a question. But the motivation was to put money into the Clinton Foundation. Now, there's an organization, Don, which you may be familiar with. It's called Charity Watch. And this is a piece I wrote that I think is going to be on the Surge today or tomorrow. Haven't heard back yet. But in that article, I talk about the Charity Watch, and that, think about this, Don, 18 years ago, they polled the rating on the Clinton Foundation, and they said at the time they didn't have any kind of a model that could be used to judge the Clinton Foundation. And so they chose to withdraw their rating, and in it they said, that's not saying that it's good or bad, it's just that we can't figure out a way in which we can evaluate the activities of this organization. 18 years later, they still haven't figured out how to rate the Clinton Foundation. And so they refuse to rate it. Charity Watch is used by a lot of individuals to make a decision of who they're going to give money to. And if you go to the charity watch for the Clinton Foundation, there ain't no rating there. So I look at it and say, if I'm Bill Clinton and I'm Hillary Clinton, and he's pointed out that he come from a town called Hope, and he was a poor white boy, mother didn't have much money, and Hillary came from middle class, so she didn't have any money. As hard as they've worked to amass at least $200 million that we know of, in many cases, a person who would be elected president with that amount of money would normally put their money in a blind trust and allow somebody else to make decisions on how it was going to be invested and managed for the time that the person was president. And I really wonder whether or not Hillary and Bill will turn over $200 million of their hard-earned money to a blind trustee, not knowing what they're going to do with the money and what it's going to be like when they get done 4 or 8 years later. In addition, so I think that the money should go in a blind trust. I think it's going to be a hard decision, and some reporter somewhere needs to write and ask that question of Hillary. The second question is, if you look at the growth in the Clinton Foundation, it came as a result of Hillary being the Secretary of State, and as a result of Mr. Clinton earning tremendous fees for speaking engagements all around the world, and money that was donated to the Clinton Foundation, some $3 billion since its beginning. So there's a huge potential of conflict of interest between Bill and Hillary as president and first gentleman, or a possibility the economic czar to bring the economy back, and her being president, of the potential for huge conflict of interest of self-dealing with the Clinton Foundation. So the second question that I want to ask Hillary is that if you were elected, will you, Bill, and Chelsea recuse yourself from any dealings with the Clinton Foundations or any solicitation of money for it? What's your thought, Bud?
Well, as usual, 3 or 4. But number one, a friend of mine did some research. You know how long it took the Clinton Foundation to be approved by the IRS? 17 days.
I didn't get approved in 17 days. It took me 3 months.
Neither did I with mine. But that's number one. There's an old saying, charity begins at home.
Right.
And someone said laughingly, Hillary and Bill bring it home every night. Everything you're saying is true, but it's interesting. When I go around the country and when I go around talking to people don't talk about the Hillary emails as much as they talk about the foundation. It sticks on a lot of people's craw.
Yeah.
The foundation does. The foundation was supposed to do a lot in Haiti. Haiti is a cesspool. It's been one for now almost 300 years. And it's not getting any better. There's millions and millions of dollars being thrown down a rat hole there. Millions being thrown over in Africa. There's been a connection found between some of the African blood diamonds and warlords, etc., and some of the Clinton Foundation projects. Perhaps they're not aware of it, etc. It's a sad place. You've brought up 3 very important things, and it's a fact that Hillary doesn't address them. All she addressed, very reluctantly, was the emails, and she lied. She consistently lied about that. What she says to the FBI, and my latest word is that they haven't deposed her, and in fact, some are arguing they don't have to. There's so much about all of this that just reeks of self-dealing that you just sit and wonder, when are the American people going to wake up? Back to you, Dan.
Well, that's a great question. As I do, as you do, a lot of interviews every week on various things. When we're talking about, for example, terrorism and safety and border control. The question I get asked the most by these talk show hosts is, what is going to have to happen to make the American people wake up and understand what kind of a serious threat we are under, that we've been lulled to sleep, and the borders, there's a report out yesterday, the number of people crossing the border is now greater than it was when we had that mass immigration in 2014. By the way, the Customs and Border Control today announced that they are separating the illegals into males, females, and now transgenders. They're going to have it.
How do they figure that one out?
I don't know how they figured that one out, but somehow they're going to have a transgender processing. It just seems to me that at times, Don, I feel like I do so many interviews and talk to so many people, and I listen to some of the people that call into the shows that I talk to, and I had one this morning. You wonder what planet these people are on, that they don't see what's going on. You have the drones who will vote for Hillary even if she's indicted under a grand jury for jeopardizing the national security of the United States. They don't really care. And I find that it's just insane that we're doing these things. But I see the clock says we've got to take another break. So this is Dan Perkins.
And Don Mazzella.
We'll be right back with Two Guys from Verona.
You're listening to Two Guys from Verona. In this final segment, Don and Dan offer their predictions on what's going to happen in our world.
Well, Brother Don, you say that this is an important decision week that may impact the viability of Mrs. Clinton as a candidate. Tell us what you think.
Well, traditionally, when you have bad news, the best time to release it is the Friday before a 3-day weekend, which is Memorial Day coming up, which is a period where we have national pride. And by the way, President Obama made sure that he was not in the country for it.
On purpose? On purpose?
I cannot read the president's mind, but you don't schedule a trip like this unless it's way far in advance. So I'll let you draw your own conclusions, or let the audience. But there is a lot of chatter in Washington these past 2 days. Then all of a sudden today it went very silent. I've had leaks, but all of a sudden today it went silent. People are not talking. We heard last week, and we heard over the weekend that there was a lot of discussion within the Justice Department about whether to interview Hillary Clinton or to go with what they got from her subordinates. That's number one. Number two, there's a discussion, should they seek indictments of Hillary Clinton for some of the various things? Though, as one very savvy lawyer told me, there's very little law that they can really hang on her. The only precedent they have is Petraeus, General Petraeus, so that's a misdemeanor. And she, as she's waived off a lot of other things, could waive it off. But it looks as if something may come down Friday so that it gets muted by a 3-day weekend. That's my prediction for today.
Now the Petraeus situation, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe the Petraeus situation, he was charged with a felony, and he plea bargained to a misdemeanor.
No, he was offered the plea bargain by the Justice Department, and his lawyers took it in a heartbeat.
But wasn't he going to be charged with a felony?
Yes.
Okay. So what we're talking.
But it's rare that prosecution comes and offers a lower penalty.
But
a misdemeanor and a penalty.
But I understood that the people at the FBI who was supporting the felony charges were quite upset that it was plea bargained down by the Justice Department to a misdemeanor.
Yes. But I strongly disagree with the FBI people. I mean, who hasn't shared pillow talk with a mistress or a wife? And that's what that apparently was. And it certainly doesn't reach the level of a felony. But be that as it may, it happened. Um, be that as it may, uh, it set a precedent. And I believe that's what will eventually, hopefully for Mrs. Clinton, be the end result of all of this hullabaloo. And that may come down as early as Friday. If it doesn't come down Friday, then look for the 4th of July weekend as the other possible date. Because it's amazing what holiday weekends do. Everybody goes off, including the media.
Right.
And but we'll be here next Tuesday, ready to talk about it.
Right.
But whether it's up or down or not at all, and we're wrong. But it's something we should really consider and really anticipate and keep listening for.
But it seems to me that the body of evidence, just one example of this body of evidence, the fact that the White House withdrew 22 emails that they said were above top secret that were transmitted by Hillary on her server, that alone has got to be a felony.
And she said with a straight face, but they weren't labeled that way.
Okay.
She said it with a straight face.
Okay, I understand that. Okay. So but if it doesn't happen this weekend, and you say earlier that she doesn't do well in California, it may be a moot point anyway, because she may be out of the race.
Yes, and Dan, I think I said last week, and I'll say again this week. Here in New Jersey, which is a heavily Democratic state,
Right.
Her lead, I'm told by both the Republican and Democrats here in the state, is dead heat, if not behind Trump. Surprisingly so. The person who told me that looked at me with total surprise on his face because he's been in politics here in New Jersey for almost 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
He said, "I would have never believed it."
Mm-hmm.
But the polls don't lie.
Right.
And
so if she's not the nominee, and whoever is if it's Uncle Joe and Pocahontas are going to run against Trump and whoever, and Trump wins, do you think Trump goes after her with a new attorney general, or does he let her get away?
Well, if Christie is the new attorney general, which Governor Christie in New Jersey, which everybody say, he'll go out at tooth and nail because he absolutely dislikes and distrusts her.
Okay. All right. So speaking of Hillary and the polls, which you just talked a little bit about, I find it amazing that in 1 month, Hillary was 11 points up on Donald Trump, and now she's dead even with him. And there's more and more evidence that, and I'm not trying to be politically correct here or incorrect. I'm just trying to be factual. The one area where she does seem to have a lead over Trump is old white women. She's not doing well with younger people. She's not doing well with young women, and she's not doing well with at all with white males. And her percentage of the black vote and Hispanic vote is not up to what it was in either of the two Obama elections. So there are a lot of people. It's interesting to see how many people are still against Trump. And last week we talked about the story in the New York Times. This week the abuse was the Politico. When the Politico did a story on a conversation with the Speaker of the House, Mr. Ryan, where they quoted him as saying that he wouldn't bet on Trump winning. And we heard the actual interview And Mr. Ryan didn't say that. Mr. Ryan he said that one, he thought Trump had a very good chance of winning, and number two, he was asked by the reporter, "Would you bet on it?" And he says, "I'm not a betting man, period." So the reporter turned the Ryan story around, and it's another example where the media and Trump jumped on it. It seems like they have this death wish to fall on the sword. Whenever they try and go after Trump or say something that they believe that everybody should believe, they run and they wind up finding themselves, wait a minute, we thought it was right. So their credibility continues to diminish. And if it's diminishing now at this point of the election, they're going to have very little credibility when it comes time in October and November.
Can I address that?
We got 15 seconds.
Oh, then I want it's just that the young people, the old guard of news people are passing from the scene. I'm including myself in that. And these new young people insert themselves into the news rather than let the news speak for itself. That's the unfortunate part that you're hearing, and it's coming home to roost.
So say goodnight, Don.
Good night. Say our favorite line and encourage people to come and talk to us.
Yeah, this is Dan Perkins, and remember, if it's important to you, it's important to us. Join us next week on Two Guys from Verona.